Welcome to our science class, and this is the first video that we will have for the first week. This would be the part 1 of the video about the human breathing system and the lesson 1 about parts and function of the respiratory system. When we get started, we will just have a brief discussion on the topic and the parts to describe each parts of the respiratory system. Let's get started. So at the end of this module, everybody would be expected to explain the mechanism of the respiratory system and how it works together with the circulatory system in order to transport the nutrients, the gases, and other molecules that is needed throughout the body. So let's get started with the lesson number 1, the parts and the function of the respiratory system or the human breathing system. Now, in the parts and functions in the respiratory system, we will have first the question, how do you survive? The fact to answer that how do you survive is that we eat. But aside from eating, the one that makes us survive of our everyday life is because we do breathe. Yung paghinga mo araw-araw. Of course, if you forgot about breathing, then you will eventually die. In order for us to understand more about this, so let's understand the mechanism of respiratory and the circulatory system and how they work together. But let us focus now with the respiratory system. In this lesson number 1, we need to answer, bakit ba tayo humihinga? Why do we breathe? Bakit kailangan mong huminga? Pwede bang hindi? Di ba hindi? How do our lungs look like? Ano bang itsura ng lungs natin? Since hindi natin siya nakikita personally, hindi natin nakikita see-through what is within our lungs, hindi mo nakikita personal, nakikita lang natin siya sa pictures, sa video, so let's understand more about your lungs. Next, how oxygen from our lungs pass into our blood. Paano ba yung nilanghap nating hangin na alam natin na may lamang oxygen, may daladalang oxygen na kailangan ng katawan natin? Paano ba yung napupunta sa blood? Paano yung napupunta sa dugo natin? And the number 4, how blood move around to deliver oxygen throughout the body. Paano ba umiikot sa buong katawan natin, simula ulo hanggang paa, yung dugo natin na may daladalang oxygen? So those are the questions that we need to answer in this module. So let's start with the activity number 1, which is entitled Oh My Malunggay. So the activity is entitled Oh My Malunggay because you are to use a branch of malunggay if there is within your area, or if there is inside your house a grapes in your refrigerator. If you have a bunch of grapes there, you may use it also. Or you may think of other representation that also looks like a bunch of grapes or a stem of malunggay. So let's just use our imagination and our creativity on this activity. So the objective of this activity, at the end of this activity, you should be able to identify the key parts of the breathing system. Dapat malaman mo pagkatapos itong activity na to kung ano-ano ba ang iba't ibang parte ng breathing system. And then we are to describe and give the function of each part. So kung malalaman natin kung ano yung iba't ibang parte ng breathing system, then we should also know its description as well as its function. Kung anong trabaho at kung anong ginagawa nito sa ating katawan. So your materials is a bunch of grapes or a stem of malunggay. Now, or to identify 4. You have the trachea, the bronchi, the bronchioles, as well as the alveoli. Now, if you take a look on the procedure number 4, there is the instruction there that you have to trace the pathway of the oxygen using your bunch of grapes or your malunggay. On part B, on your activity, you have there the image of a boy with arrows, the human respiratory system. You are to label that parts. So right after that you have finished this activity, now we'll move to what is it or the explanation of this activity. Now, on this activity, we use a bunch of grapes or we use malunggay as a representation. So, it has somewhat similarity of how does our lungs look like, the same as with the bunch of grapes or the malunggay leaf. So, how does this air from the nose goes into our lungs? So, we have there the path of air, yung dinadaanan ng hangin. So, let's start with the mouth or the nose. Pwede kasing dalawang daanan ng hangin. It could be on the nose or it could be in the mouth. So, from the nose, it will go to the nasal cavity. Anong gagawin ng hangin sa nasal cavity? Now, in the nasal cavity, it is where the air will filtered. Kung may filter tayo sa camera na tinatanggalan lahat ng dumi, peklat, o kung ano man meron sa mukha natin para maging maganda, the air is filtered within the nasal cavity. Bakit kailangan i-filter? Bakit hindi pwedeng dire-diretso na lang? So, we need to filter the air from the nasal cavity to avoid dirt, germs, bacteria, or other unnecessary things to go into the lungs para the lungs will be free from infection. So, in order for us to receive a clean air, it will filtered in the nasal cavity using the nostrils and other things inside the nasal cavity. Somewhat curious, pag medyo nahawakan natin yung loob ng ilong natin, makakahawa ka dun ng maliliit na buhok, maninipis na buhok, which helps us to filter the air. Kaya kung minsan may natatanggal kang dumi, those are the dirts that is filtered within the air that you inhaled. Kaya kung gaano siya kaitim, kung gaano siya kaputi, that is all air na nalanghap mo kung malinis o madumi ba yung hangin na nalanghap mo. So, meaning to say, kapag maitim yung nakuha mo, maduming hangin yung nalanghap mo, but nasala mo or in the nasal cavity, nasala niya yung dumi bago pa man pumasok sa iyong lower part of the respiratory system. Okay? Those filtered air will now move into your pharynx. What's the purpose of the pharynx? Pharynx is the main passageway of both food and air. So, dalawa yung dumadaan kay pharynx. It could be the food or it could be the air. Pwedeng pagkain, pwedeng hangin. Pero, parehas ba sila ng dadaanan pagkatapos? No. In the pharynx, magkakaroon tayo ng hiwalayan. This pharynx leads into two passageway. Merong dalawang daanan si pharynx. Number 1 is esophagus and the number 2 is the trachea. Esophagus would be for the passage of the food na nakadugtong sa stomach, and trachea would be the passageway of the air which is nakadugtong naman kay lungs. So, inside your body, na hindi natin nakikita from the nose, diretso kay nasal cavity, baba tayo kay pharynx. In the pharynx, magkakaroon tayo dyan ng two passageway, isa para sa pagkain, isa naman para sa hangin. And you always take note that food is for esophagus and air is for the trachea. Let's go back with the flow of the air. So we started with the nose, it goes to the nasal cavity, and then in the nasal cavity, it will go down to the pharynx. Pharynx has two passageway. Kung hangin ang dadaan, then we'll move to trachea. Nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, and then go down to trachea. Trachea is also called as windpipe. From the word itself, pipe, tubo, wind, hangin, tubo, nadaanan ng hangin. So it is only for the air. So from the pharynx, it will go down to the windpipe or the trachea, which is the main passageway of the air going into the lungs. When we say main passageway, ibig sabihin, yun lang ang mismong daanan ng hangin papunta sa lungs. Since we have two lungs, the left and the right lungs. Trachea is only a one straight tube. Paano makakarating ang hangin sa kaliwa at sa kanan nating lungs kung ang trachea ay isang diretsyong tubo lamang? So, para mag-connecta si trachea to our lungs, we have this called branching tubes. Branching tubes is what we call as bronchi. Bronchi will be the branching tubes, the large tubes that branch off to connect with the left and with the right lungs. So, magkakaroon tayo doon ng paghiwalay dalawang daanan, branching tubes that is called bronchi to connect with the left and the right lungs. Now, after the bronchi, this bronchi will be subdivided into finer tubes, into thinner tubes. Masasubdivide pa siya sa mas maliit pang tubes. And this bronchi, the small version, is now called bronchioles. Now, this bronchioles will lead us to the ends of this bronchioles, the air sacs. Yung air sacs, from the word itself, air, hangin, sacs, parang sako, mga bilog-bilog na parang sako na naglalaman ng air. Now, this air sacs is called alveoli. It is found at the end of every bronchioles. So, bawat dulo ng bronchioles, you will see an alveoli. Now, this alveoli is the exact location where the exchange of gases occurs. So, dito nangyayari talaga ang pagpapalitan ng gases. Ano ba yung gases na ginagamit natin sa respiratory system? We have only two. We have the oxygen and the other one is the carbon dioxide. Yung papasok sa katawan natin is oxygen. We inhale oxygen and then we exhale carbon dioxide. Those are the two gases referred in the respiratory system. Now, how does this gas, oxygen and carbon dioxide, exchange in the lungs? That is through the alveoli. Now, in the alveoli, doon nangyayari ang pagpapalitan ng gases from oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, so let us have now the lungs. Lungs is the main organ in the respiratory system. When we say main organ, ito yung mismong organ sa katawan natin na mismong gumagana in the respiratory system. Since in the respiratory system, we're talking about the way we breathe, the process of breathing. So, meaning to say, ano bang ginagamit natin para only lungs? So, if your lungs will be infected, then your breathing system will also be infected. Now, trivia about the lungs. So, lungs is left lung, kaliwa. The left lung is smaller than your right lung. So, mas maliit ang left kesa sa right. So, meaning to say, the lungs is not of the same size. They are symmetrical para sa itsura, but their sizes differ, which is the left is smaller than the right. Now, I have prepared a video clip that shows how the air goes into your nose and into your lungs. So let us watch this.
We cannot breathe underwater because our lungs can take in free oxygen from air but not the dissolved oxygen in water. And why is that? We take in air or inhale through nose or mouth. Breathing through nose is better as mucus and hairs in the nasal cavity can filter out lots of dirt from the air. Then the air enters trachea or windpipe through pharynx or throat. This pharynx has one more opening which leads to food pipe. Whenever air enters it, stomach sends it back as burp. Now, air passes through the windpipe, then the two bronchi, which forms many narrower branches called bronchioles. Small air sacs or alveoli receive the air, and oxygen from air diffuses into blood through thin wall of blood capillaries during the diffusion process.
Okay, so I hope you learned about something in this video which just briefly explained the module number 1 about the human breathing system. So I hope this will help you to answer also your module and to help you understand more about the topic. Thank you for listening.